Hi there guys, let's have a look at this C.I.L. Model 401 single shot shotgun. Now these shotguns are not terribly uncommon, however this particular one is a little more uncommon because it is chambered for the 28 gauge shell, and you don't see very many of these around. These are manufactured in Brazil by the Brazilian cartridge company, and they were imported into Canada by Canadian Industries Limited. Pretty decent looking piece of wood on this little shotgun for an economy type of shotgun. Nice grain. I believe this has been called Brazilian walnut. I don't know if that's the correct terminology for it or not, but that's what I've heard it called. Much more common than these Model 401s are the Model 402. The Model 402 has a white line spacer here. It's got a white line spacer on the butt pad, and it also has a plastic butt plate. This particular Model 401 actually has a steel butt plate. The small gauge CBC produced guns are made on a smaller frame than the 12 gauge and the 16s, which makes them more compact and nicer to carry. See the barrel stampings on the right hand side of the gun, made in Brazil by the Brazilian cartridge company. It's got their address there. And on the other side of the barrel we have the gauge markings. 28 gauge, 2 3/4 inch, full choke, proof tested. Controls on this are very simple, as you would expect on any single shot shotgun. We've got a plastic button on the bottom of the receiver at the front of the trigger guard. You just push that button and the barrel hinges open on the hinge pin, which is this piece right here. The gun is equipped with an extractor, not an ejector. So it just picks the shell up and you have to pull it out yourself. It doesn't throw it free. We've got a hammer with no half cock notch. Basically it's either fully cocked or a head. With the trigger pulled, the hammer will go all the way ahead. If we open the breech up, we can show you that. When the hammer goes all the way ahead, the firing pin sticks out. You can see the firing pin move back and forth. And without having the trigger pulled, the hammer will not go all the way ahead. So the safe position for one of these, if you're carrying it hunting loaded, is with the hammer in the forward position like that. It is blocked from, if you drop the gun, the hammer will not go ahead and strike the firing pin and fire the gun. We've got a plastic trigger guard, and we've got a steel trigger, smooth in this case. There's our markings on the bottom, C.I.L. Model 401. The Model 402 is a lot more common. Serial number is underneath the piece of tape there. We've got this plastic hinge piece here, which on this gun is still in good shape because this one hasn't seen hardly any use at all by the looks of it. These quite often crack and break, these plastic hinge pieces. It's kind of a weak point on these guns. We've got a fairly slender forend, which also appears to be made out of that Brazilian walnut. And it's much more slender than on the later Model 402s. Use a much wider beaver tail style of forend. So this is a much more slender style. I kind of prefer this. It fits in with the smaller size of the gun. Moving up front, we've got a simple brass bead for a front sight, and this is a 28 inch full choke barrel, blued. And the buttstock on this one is actually a fairly attractive piece of wood for a cheap gun. These would have been at the the bottom end of the price scale back in the day, but this is actually a pretty decent looking piece of wood. I don't think you'd find anything like this on a a bargain single shot today. Lots of nice grain on that. And another kind of interesting thing about these 401s is they have a steel butt plate. Later versions, the 402 uses a plastic butt plate with a white spacer, and this is actually steel, and it's got the Brazilian Cartridge Company logo stamped onto it there and a few grooves, but it is terribly slippery. It slides off your jacket very easily, so although it looks nice, it's kind of probably not quite as practical as the plastic grooved one that they used in the later versions. So what makes this gun rather unusual compared to most of these Brazilian single shots is the fact that this is an early version and it's in the 28 gauge, and I have never seen another one of these in person in 28 gauge. So kind of an unusual thing to come across. 28 gauge is one of those things which would have died years ago, except that it is a registered skeet competition gauge, and that is what has kept 28 gauge alive all these years. Like most single shots, this is a takedown, and takedown is quite easy to do. Of course, first you want to make sure that the chamber's unloaded. Close the action back up again and simply pull the front end of the forearm straight down and pull the fore end off. And you can see that there's a big spring under here with a catch, and we've got this plastic piece at the end that has a steel reinforcement in the middle of it. And this plastic piece often breaks off on these guns when they're used any amount, especially in cold weather. And you can see that the fore end has a couple of numbers stamped on it there. It says 28 and 32, so this fore end would be interchangeable with the 28 gauge and the 410, which is known in some locales as a 32 gauge, even though it really isn't a 32 gauge. With the fore end off, it's just a matter of opening the gun with the button and taking the barrel right off. So very easy to disassemble for transport or for cleaning. And since we have the barrel off, let's have a look inside there. Pretty simple. Got a hinge pin and a stop for the barrel, and you can see our breech face at the back there with the firing pin, and that triangular shaped piece just below the breech is the lock, and it's connected to the button on the bottom, so when the button is moved, you can see that the lock moves up and down, and that lock interfaces with this surface on the back of the barrel here to lock the gun up. And you can see our extractor here. The later versions, I think they switched over to an ejector instead. An ejector is kind of a nice feature on a hunting gun. It gets the shell out of the chamber quickly when you fire it. This is just a simple extractor. So overall, simplicity is the name of the game with these. You can see where the hinge pin connects up with the front of the barrel lump, and the barrel lump looks like it's brazed on to the barrel itself. And another component that's brazed onto the barrel is the latch at the front that the fore end connects onto. So to put the gun back together again, quite simple of course. Just take your barrel and put it back inside the receiver, hinge it closed, take our fore end and put the tail end of the fore end into the front of the receiver. Make sure that this latch lines up with the catch and carefully snap it shut. I wouldn't recommend taking these things apart any more than necessary because eventually you will break that plastic piece, and I definitely wouldn't recommend taking them apart in cold weather because you really are very likely to break that plastic piece in cold weather when it gets brittle. Let's give this little 28 gauge a try on some clay targets. Seems to do the job if you point it in the right place.